Hey guys, welcome back. So last time we created our social database and we also created a test table, which is called test, but of course it has no values in. So let's go ahead and add some values to that now. Now, we could just click insert here and manually add some values, but we're not going to do that. We're going to insert values with our PHP code. So in order to insert values into our database using a PHP code, we need to actually write a connection between the two, because at the moment, this doesn't know anything about this database that we've just created. So we have to write a bit of code which will allow this page here to connect to this database. And it's really easy. We're going to go back to index.php, and then I'm going to put some space above that HTML block, and I'm going to open up my PHP tags like this, and then close it off. So this right here, if you've never seen PHP, this is how you open and close a PHP block. So we can put all of our PHP code inside of this tags. You can't put PHP code outside of here because it's not a PHP block. So you have to actually put it inside of tags like this. So anyway, what we're going to do is create our connection variable. So we're going to say $con. Now $, of course, is how you create variables in PHP. Some languages you would say var con like that, but with PHP you just say $, and then the name of your variable. So we'll say con like this equals MySQLi underscore connect. So MySQLi underscore connect, and this is the function that allows us to connect to databases, and it takes 4 parameters. The first is going to be the host, so we can just write localhost in there. I think you can also do null and it will default to localhost, but we're just going to write localhost, be a bit more explicit. Alright, so the first parameter is the host, so let's just put localhost. The second one is going to be the username for our database, and of course when we did this a second ago, we didn't create a username for our social database, so we can just write the default username, which is just root, like this. If you create a username and password, you would have to type that in there. So the next parameter is the password. Now, of course, like you said, we didn't create a username and we didn't create a password either. So you can use a default password, which on a local host is just an empty string. There's no password set. Okay, so just put an empty string in there. And then the very last parameter we're going to put is just the name of the database. Now, of course, we're going to type in this name here, social, because that's what we call our database. You would replace this with whatever you called your database. So I called it social, so that's what I write in there. And this is our connection to the database. So to check if that worked, underneath there, we're going to say if, and then MySQLi underscore connect underscore ERRNO, which is error number. And then put an empty parentheses on there, and then put your curly brackets on the end of the if statement. So this function right here, MySQLi error number, just returns the error that was found when trying to connect to the database. So if there's no error, this won't return anything. But if there is an error, it will go inside this if statement. We can just say echo, and then in double quotes, failed to connect, like this. And then after that, we can just say a dot, which is how you join strings together in PHP. And then just take this again, to copy this function call, paste it there, and put a semicolon as well. So this is just saying, if there's an error, print out the error for us. And it'll say failed to connect, and then the error it found, just to give us a bit of a clue as to what went wrong when trying to connect to the database. So let's save that, and that should be enough now. We should be able to connect to the database. If you refresh the page and don't see any errors, you know it worked. If I change the name of this, so this social is the name of our database, if I change it to something which doesn't exist, so I'm changing it to sandwiches, like that, there's no database of mine called sandwiches, I'll press refresh and I should see an error message saying unknown database sandwiches because we have no database called that. So I'll just revert this back to social, and like I said, if you refresh the page and see no errors, you know it worked. So the very last thing we'll do then is just do a simple query to test inserting into this test table of ours. So underneath there, we'd write a very simple query, just say query equals MySQLi underscore query. And inside there, we have to specify the connection variable like this, because the first parameter is the connection to the database it's going to use to execute this query. And we know that this con right here, this con variable, contains the connection to the database. So we're saying use this connection to the database and then execute this query. And you need to put the query in double quotes. We'll just say insert into, and then test, because test is the name of the table we just created right here. So if you remember, the test table has 2 columns, an ID and a name. So we can just say values like this, and inside parentheses, we're going to just put the values. So the first value is the ID. And like I said, the ID value is set to auto increment. So this will automatically get a value. So we don't actually have to insert anything here. So you can just put an empty single quotes if you want. and then do a comma, and then type in the name. So we can just put any string in there. Like I said, this is just a test table, and we'll be deleting this table soon. So just put whatever you want in here. Just put some string, and you need to put it inside single quotes. So inside quotes, just put something. I'll just put Reese like this, and then put a semicolon at the end of that. Press save, and then refresh the page, and you should hopefully see the value inserted. So there's nothing on the page, but if I refresh the test table now, you'll see this value with ID 1 and then name Reese. Now, if this didn't work for you, what you might need to do is change this single quotes to null, like this, okay? Now, that should do exactly the same thing. If I refresh the page again now, it should do the same thing. It should insert again. And now what we have is 2 rows in the table with the name Reese, but see how the auto increment ID has gone from 1, and now this one's inserted with 2. So if single quotes don't work for you there, just put a null, and this depends on your settings of your PHP MyAdmin. So some people will be able to use single quotes like I just did, but sometimes you won't be able to use single quotes and you have to use null. So just know that in the course from now on, if single quotes didn't work for you, just use null instead, okay? So even in future videos, if I'm using single quotes for my ID column, you may need to use null if that didn't work for you, okay? And you can change this again to something else. Optimus Prime, click save, and then refresh the page. Oh, that's the PHP MyAdmin. Refresh this page instead, so the query will execute, and now I can go and refresh this test table, and you should see Optimus Prime in there. So great, we created the connection to our database, and then we did a little query just to test it out that was inserting into our test table.